All right, welcome to Tech Updates number 2. This is for the week of September 28th. I'm recording this on Saturday, October 4th, so this is the full week. And right now I've got the draft pulled up in Substack of Tech Updates number 2, and so I'm recording the video version of it, and then I'll add that into the email newsletter part and then send it out. So you can either read through it or you can watch this video version of it and watch me talk about the same things. So I've been slowly redefining or improving my notes of when I've got a section in Notion where I drop these notes throughout the week. And basically the sections I've got are research and learning, future research to do, commands to remember, improvements, and mistakes. And so we'll go through it. So what have I been learning this week and researching? I've been researching adding Open Web UI into a Docker container to add a web UI front for my Ollama local AI models. And if you want to see what I've already built or talked about, go back to the previous episodes, and this is just kind of what I'm doing. So this video kind of covers that. Network Chuck's got a ton of cool stuff, videos and tutorials and good ideas and stuff if you want to go play with stuff. But yeah, web UI lets you put a front end, and there's other ones you can use. That's just one that he used in the video and one I've been researching. You can put a web front end so it looks like ChatGPT in front of your local AI models. So kind of cool, so you don't have to do it all command line. I'm also researching running local MCP servers in Docker containers as well. This MCP stuff is where I see myself going deeper over the next few weeks and months in AI automation and orchestration. It's some really neat stuff and how you can use these protocols to talk to all the APIs and do stuff and use your LLM on the front end to talk to all the APIs for you, and so you don't have to remember all the API coding and stuff. So that's pretty neat. I also was using Claude a lot this week, and one cool example of what you can do with the AI stuff is I had a 5-minute conversation with Claude about Docker. I've been playing with Docker for a couple weeks, and so I'm pretty new to it. I've been aware of it for years. I just hadn't done a ton with it. I didn't realize how some of the architecture favors stacks, and then you can use a YAML compose file in one directory and bring up multiple related containers versus just doing everything one-liners or bringing them up manually and individually. So some of that's just having to retrain how I've done thinking about virtualization and OS stuff and building one-to-one instead of one-to-many type stuff. But I talked with the AI and I was like, hey, explain this concept to me, and it would explain it to me, and then I would type back and say, hey, is that kind of like this, or can I do that with it? And it would say, yes, you can. Or at one point it said, no, you're thinking about this wrong. Think about it like this. And it gave me like an example or a metaphor. And then I would say, oh, okay, so that means this. And then I would say, am I right? And I would kind of do like these check on learning things and talk back and forth with it for about 5 or 10 minutes. And basically it taught me the concept and the way I explained it back to it. And in about 5-10 minutes, I got what the same thing as had I watched an hour-long video on YouTube about something like a lesson or been in a class to learn about it. And I really think having 15, 18 years of technical background, that helps me be able to input good information into the AI and then also be able to understand very quickly what it's giving back to me. So if you've got good technical aptitude and reference, and you also know how to give good information, you can get good information, and you can also use that to learn fast and scale up. So that was an exciting and a fun thing to do this week with AI. Future research to do. I've got a reminder on my list to look at migrating from Notion to Obsidian or using it as a backup, just in case Notion ever goes down or decides to take away their free tier someday. I may want to have exports of all my data that I've put in there. I've got a ton. I've basically moved all my notation systems to Notion. Even if it starts out in Notepad++ or whatever, eventually most everything makes it into Notion in some form or another of all my notes and information. It's very useful, very handy. Maybe sometime I'll give a tour of Notion and how I use it. But I've got calendars, I've got project boards, I've got creative project boards, I've got technical stuff in there. All my notes, ideas, just journals, tons of it. Everything's in Notion. It's super useful. Commands to remember. So this was a command that I got from a video or from AI. I don't remember. Basically to help me watch the output of my video card stuff. NVIDIA-SMI will give you a snapshot of what your video card is doing right now. But if you throw the watch command in front of it and tell it to refresh every half a second, you can see when you're running stuff on your box how it handles it. All right, improvements. So the way I do my video editing, I use DaVinci Resolve, and the free version, which has everything, but on Linux they don't have the codecs for what is it, Q254 or H254, 264, whatever it is, I can't remember now. Anyways, so when I record a video here like this in OBS, if I want to go edit it in DaVinci and cut out all my or any mistakes, then I have to run FFmpeg and convert it into a .mov file so that the DaVinci Resolve codecs can read it. And that is a command line like this. You have to type FFmpeg-I, the video file, -C, :V, ProRes, and like you have to go look this up and find the right flags, and that's really hard to remember. And so I just wrote a cool script, and what it does is it just asks you for the input file and asks you what do you want to name it, and then it does it all for you without looking. And so this is, I'll zoom in and show you. This is what it looks like when it runs. I won't show you the code because it's ugly and it doesn't have a lot of error correcting or anything like that. But basically, you run it and it says, please tell me what you want, the name of the file. It says this will convert an MP4 video to MOV. No error correction. Just open the video file to test it if you want, because it's basically going to work or it's not going to work. So I said, hey, put in test.mov or test.mp4 and make it come out as test.mov. It runs. It shows all this FFmpeg output, which can look weird and crazy. But then at the bottom, it finishes and says, hey, we finished, and it took me, this one took 13 seconds because it's a little short, little 10-second test video. But it takes about 15-20 minutes to convert your video over. And then I can grab that video file and go throw it in DaVinci Resolve and start editing it. And then re-encode it into something else to put on YouTube or whatever. So lots of transcoding video back and forth. And if you get into any serious video editing, you'll be familiar with that and having to do that kind of stuff. And that's also kind of why I had the file vault or the file server that's running that I showed in my podcast I showed my home lab. And so I've got I've got it named File Vault, but it's just a server down in my basement. Actually, here's the picture of it. So yeah, I got 3 10 terabyte hard drives in here running in a RAID ZX1, whatever, on TrueNAS scale. And so that is very handy for storing all my video storage, because the more you make videos, you realize they take up a lot of storage. All right, what else did I do this week? I used Claude AI to troubleshoot and learn what size AI models I could run successfully on my hardware. So I've got a 3060 card here, and I've got 64 gig of RAM. And so I was able to load a 70 billion parameter model for 55 gig of RAM, but I didn't realize that overloaded the GPU. And if you just want to say hi, hello, and how are you, and what is today, and tell me what is the capital of Argentina or something, it could talk to you just fine. But if you wanted to start doing like anything complex, like analyze this or think about that, it would just bog down and slow down and then transferring stuff back and forth between the CPU and GPU. And basically you're going to hit whatever timeout you've set, like 20 minutes. So I learned about how different size models run, and then I got the right size models that can run about anywhere from 7 to 14 billion parameter models on my 12 gigabyte video card successfully. Other cool things I did, I installed a Cloudflare tunnel to a Docker container. I also used Claude and a YouTube video to do this. And so you go into Cloudflare and you can set up free tunnels, and basically it's a DNS address off one of your domain names, and then you can point it and you just run a little script and set up a Docker container in the Docker container, and that gives you a secure tunnel to your DNS name and then into your Docker environment. And then I also got an N8N instance in a Docker container, and I used Claude and this video here to do that. And then so I had Claude help me write a Docker Compose file that brings them up, and it auto starts when it reboots, and Docker auto restarts. And then I also added Cloudflare security in front of my DNS tunnel. So now when I go to this subdomain off of a domain name I own, it prompts for security or like Google OAuth. So you got to log in and auth to get past the security page to get to the login page of my N8N instance, and then I can log into that and start playing around with automation. I spent a lot of time this week in N8N doing cool workflows. Let me see if I've got one open. So here's one that I've been working on. This is kind of cool. And this one is just to send RSS feeds over to my Discord, which is kind of fun and kind of neat. And then, so the workflow automates RSS feeds, checks every 2 hours, and I got it set to half hours right now. But it goes from like Hacker News, Bleepy Computer, and Krebs on Security, and sends those over to my Discord and one of my tech RSS channels. So I've got a lot more automation ideas in the pipeline, and that's really cool and fun. And sometimes you're like, oh, this will be simple. And I watched this YouTube video of this example, and then you realize 3 hours later it barely works or it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, it takes a long time and a lot of trial and error. But it's fun, and that's how you learn. So I can see the N8N automation stuff being very useful at work for repetitive tasks, and I can see the MCP stuff being very useful for using LLMs to talk to the APIs of stuff to get information on the fly. And that's what I'm going to start working towards and building to. All right, mistakes. This is what I mentioned this earlier. If you try to use larger AI models because even though I thought I had enough RAM, that will overload your GPU, and it'll be very slow, and you'll be like, well, this is worthless and useless. I just mentioned a lot of trial and error in the N8N nodes, and that's the only way to learn is just trial, error, Google, search, talk with your AI. I think one day I ran out of free responses from Claude by 10 a.m. and so I had to go switch over to Google Gemini and stuff. So I can see why people who do this stuff seriously end up paying for stuff. And I've already got some APIs set up, but paying for like the desktop versions. And then, the other thing you got to learn is the AI recommendations and answers don't always work. Sometimes it'll say, hey, do this or use this code. And you'll try and be like, that doesn't work at all. And you'll try and say, oh, I got an error. And you keep trying. And then I go, okay, we spent 15 minutes on this idea. This does not work. Or this method you told me, this box doesn't exist. They've updated the software. The AI is not quite up to date, or it's not quite exactly. And say, what's another method? Give me another angle we can approach this idea from. And it'll say, okay, yeah, let's try something new. And so you have to realize it's just like talking with another engineer. You're not always going to get 100% perfect answer. And sometimes you're going to have to work harder on stuff to figure it out. But if you know what you're doing, it can be a very useful engineering buddy. And they generally don't have work drama along with it when you talk to them. So that's going to do it for this week's tech updates. Talk to you guys later.